turned it on. I think I got it.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So I think we'll just do the Mahamudra lineage prayer before we start. Dorje changchen de lo narodam magamila chuje gamboba dusum sheja kunken gamaba 제시 중계 규반젠난다 제다 자순 바덴 루바소 sablam jagya chelangani Nyamme drogon dakpo kangula soan depso kagula mana gyupan zeno namtar jinjilo shen 공기 강파 송바시 세노군라 차신 메바담 세든드 탑주베 공젠라 예굴 shenpa mebar jinjilo mugu gonggi gur sompashi menwa tego chepe lamala yundu sowa 공젠라 주민 문국의 월진지로 앵매 공기 모실 송바시 강샬 독뱅오 소만데 마주대가 조배공젠다 공자로단레월진지로 남동오 주구송바시 지양마인 지양찰원 Sadam lamgi anten ranzone dorje changi kopan yurto shu. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Everyone who's made it this far. So, you might have noticed that this morning my approach was kind of maybe more like a modern one, where we had a good amount of discussion while we were talking about some foundational information. And I really think it went well, and I was glad that everybody was getting into it. That being said, this afternoon we might have more of a traditional approach, where mostly I'll just share text with you, add a little bit of commentary, and then maybe open up to question and answer, or if you have question and answer during the material, then we can also speak about it. So, as well as anybody online, feel free to ask questions. So this morning we went over the Four Noble Truths, the Six Perfections, the Noble Eightfold Path, and then the 12 Links of Interdependence. And that is a pretty wide range of teachings. At least it's the four of the earliest foundational teachings the Buddha taught. And I wanted to lay that out in a relatively concise manner where it was all fitting together. And so the handout kind of follows that. But there's a great deal of elaboration that can be done upon those four topics. And so this afternoon, I'm going to be relying on the more in-depth explanations from teachers who have very kindly produced Dharma books. So maybe we'll learn more about that this way. So the first topic that I would like to give some more detail on via relying on a Dharma teacher is going to be on the topic of the six perfections. And there is a great chapter in Living in Compassion. And so I think it might be nice. Perhaps some of you have already read this book, perhaps not, but there is a chapter here on the six perfections. So, I think we're going to go into it. I'll add a little bit of commentary here and there, and also it's great because it's getting really meta because Rinpoche himself adds commentary. So I'll be reading his bits of commentary on the root text, which is more like the, explaining the six perfections, and then I'll add my commentary onto his commentary. So you'll be getting that. My commentary is sparse, so I'm very glad that we have Rinpoche's texts. So in case anybody does have the book at home, this is starting on page 109, right after 108, and here we go. So, to begin our discussion of the six perfections, it would be good to bring to mind what we said earlier about bodhicitta. The mind of awakening. We said that if the merit of bodhicitta had form, it would fill the entire universe and in fact would be even larger than that. This image represents the fact that the merit of meditating on bodhicitta, which means cultivating loving kindness and compassion for all beings, is immeasurable. As you come to understand bodhicitta, you will see that it is the most essential and important aspect of Dharma. Bodhicitta has two aspects, relative and absolute. Relative bodhicitta is also divided into two aspects, which are known as aspiration bodhicitta and implementation bodhicitta. The six perfections are the trainings or practices of this implementation bodhicitta. Even more meritorious than the cultivation of the aspiration bodhicitta of loving kindness and compassion is the cultivation of the training of the 6 perfections, which is the same training and implementation bodhicitta that has been engaged in by all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in the past. The 6 perfections are generosity, morality, patience, diligence, meditative stability, and knowledge. Since the 6 perfections are the trainings of implementation bodhicitta, then this training must be preceded by the generation of aspiration bodhicitta. What is aspiration bodhicitta? It is the generation of the attitude or thought that, just as all of the previous Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have generated the intention to attain supreme awakening in exactly that way that they did, I generate this intention. Implementation bodhicitta goes beyond this pure and perfect intention of aspiration bodhicitta. It means actually engaging in the practice of the 6 perfections. In short, of all of the practices that have been done by all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the past in order to attain awakening. These practices are the means to attain the awakening for which you have aspired. The difference between aspiration and implementation bodhicitta is therefore said to be like the difference between wishing to go somewhere and actually going on the journey to that place. In general, the 6 perfections are the practice of implementation bodhicitta. In particular, among the 6 perfections, the one that is the most important is patience. In practice, it is only possible to work on developing patience in the presence of something that could anger us. Without something that potentially makes us angry, there is no possible way we can practice or exercise patience. Thus, in situations of family life, work, and things such as working with the Dharma Center, we have a great opportunity to cultivate patience. So once I heard this story about a Buddhist teacher, and unfortunately I'm forgetting his name, but apparently there was a Buddhist teacher, and he was traveling with a group of his disciples, and he was a learned Lama, and therefore there was a lot to be taken care of. As anybody knows, if you're attending a teacher, where are all their things? Did you get the tea? Where are his robes? All of these things that an attendant has to see to. And he had an attendant who everybody agreed was very useless and could never get anything right, and always forgetting things, always losing things, and he drove everybody crazy. And so the other disciples thought, oh, our teacher is too nice. He's never going to get rid of this useless attendant. We're going to have to do something. And so they're thinking, okay, on our teacher's behalf, what we're going to do is we're going to move on and not tell him. And we're gonna make sure that he just doesn't come, and we're gonna tell him that he's got to go. So then, as they move to the next location for the teaching, the teacher's wondering where his attendant is, and he can't find him. And so the other monks say, well, he wasn't very helpful, so we told him, maybe it's better that he doesn't come. And the teacher goes, what? That was our best teacher. How can you do that? That monk was so important. And they're like, what are you talking about? He was always messing everything up. And he goes, no, he was my best patience teacher. We need to get him back. And so then they had to go bring the monk back. That's one nice story that I've heard here. There you go. Thank you very much. It was Atisha and his quote-unquote useless disciple. So, let's consider briefly why the perfections are called that. What is perfect about them? The first of the 6 is the perfection of generosity. It is called the perfection of generosity because from the actual act of generosity itself, all the way until the arising of the complete result of that generosity, the entire process is sealed with the non-conceptualization of the giver, the gift, and the recipient. The absence of conceptualization of these 3 aspects is what makes the virtue of generosity is what makes this virtue of generosity what is called the transcendent virtue or perfection of generosity. Therefore, when we speak, for example, of the perfection of generosity, we are using the term of the cause, generosity, together with the term of the result, perfection. In the same way, the names of each of the perfections, such as the perfection of morality, of patience, and so on, link the cause, which is the particular act, with the result, which is the transcendent virtue or perfection. As we go along, we will discuss in more depth what is meant by the non-conceptualization of the three aspects, since it is very closely tied to the meaning of the sixth perfection, that of knowledge or prana. Among the six perfections, the first to be considered in sequence is generosity. And generosity has three aspects: material generosity, dharmic generosity, and the giving of protection. The first of these, material generosity, also has three varieties, which are giving, great giving, and utmost giving. There is one thing about this act of giving that needs to be understood from the beginning. Whether you are giving something large or giving something small, the act of generosity cannot be performed within the context of having a great hope for some kind of payback or personal profit. For example, if you give someone $1 with the hope that you will acquire a good reputation or a good name in the community, or in the hope that at some point in the future they will give you $2, this is not the pure practice of generosity. Generosity, whether it is great or small, must be done without any hope for personal benefit. It must be done entirely out of the hope of benefiting the recipient, making them happy, and alleviating their particular suffering, whether it is poverty or any other type of suffering. So, before we hear Barda Rinpoche break down the three types of material generosity, I'd like to mention one technique that he once taught us here at KPL. And actually, he gave this teaching during a wedding. He was, what do you call this, officiating my older sister's marriage here in this room. And he was teaching us about the relationship between my sister and her husband as they were getting married, and the fact that when you are joining in that type of relationship, the feeling of giving should be like giving from one hand to another, which is not like two separate things. And so that teaching, and then maybe I heard this other one at another time, but the technique is this. If you are someone who has a hard time with material giving, what you can do to start practicing is putting something in one hand and then practice giving it to the other hand. And in this way, you can start learning how to be able to let go of something and not feel such a great loss because it's only your other hand, so you'll get it back. But still, it's the practice. So it brought this to mind. So if you have any friends who have a hard time with giving, maybe they can start learning this way. The first of these three types of material generosity, which is simply called giving, is giving something material that can be quite small. For example, it could be a bowl of food or a cup of tea. It is important to understand that provided your motivation for giving is pure, the size of the gift itself is basically irrelevant. In a traditional Buddhist practice called the Confession of Downfalls, it is said that the virtue of giving even a mouthful of food to an animal can be a tremendous act of virtue if your motivation is pure. Furthermore, by making use of the profound meditations and mantras that have been taught by the skillful and compassionate Buddha, you can actually transform a very small material offering into something that will be perceived by its recipients as something tremendously large. For example, by consecrating one drop of water or one grain with the mantra known as the Sky Treasury Mantra, or others like it, you can cause it to be experienced by numberless recipients, such as animals and especially hungry ghosts. as an inexhaustible treasury of desirable offerings which will fulfill their every need, as great as the grains of sand in the river Ganges. Furthermore, those recipients to whom it is dedicated will all receive the offering equally, without some getting it and others missing it, and so on. So one thing is, I don't personally have the mantra known as the Sky Treasury mantra, but it's possible that Lama Tratup or Lama Nyima might. So if you're interested in that, let me know and we can try to find these things. In connection with this type of generosity, there is a practice that is traditionally done in the evenings, which is called the burnt offering of sur. There are two types of sur offerings. The first is called karsur, or white burnt offerings, in which case the offerings consist of grain, yogurt, milk, and sometimes pieces of silk or other cloth that are burnt and singed in a fire. The characteristic of karsur is that no meat whatsoever is used. The other type of sur offering is called marsur, or red burnt offerings, in which the ingredients are the same as above, but with the addition of meat. The ritual that is recited in connection with the burning of the offerings is designed to consecrate them, so that the smoke of the offerings can actually be received by the intended recipients. In the case of karsur, the primary recipient, those who are especially benefited by it, are the types of pretas, or hungry ghosts, who move about through the human realm. Most of those pretas, like what are called the three whites and the three sweets, which are milk, yogurt, and butter, and sugar, molasses, and honey. The reason it is necessary to especially dedicate the offerings to these beings is that the nature of pretas is that they cannot receive anything that is not particularly dedicated to them. In the case of marsur, the basic attitude is the same, but in that case, the particular recipients are potentially spiteful or harmful spirits who would otherwise hurt you and others, and by receiving the offerings, they are pleased and satisfied, and their spitefulness is alleviated. An essential part of this practice is the consecration of the practitioner through meditation on him or herself as Chenrezig, and the consecration of the offerings through the use of the various mantras such as the Sky Treasury mantra and others. The function of all these elements coming together is that the intended beings not only receive physical satisfaction from receiving the offerings, but are benefited in other ways as well. Because the ritual contains the mantras of Chenrezig and other deities, it becomes not only material generosity, but also the generosity of the Dharma. As well, since by satisfying these spirits, you prevent them from harming other beings, it also becomes the generosity of protection. Therefore, the practice of sur is a complete practice of the threefold generosity. Whether the practice of sur uses an abbreviated or an extensive liturgy, in general, the recipients of sur offerings consists of the four classes of recipients, who are called the four guests or recipients. The first of these is the three jewels, who are recipients of veneration, and they are offered the first portion of the offering, which is in their case considered an offering and not a gift. The purpose of making this offering to them is that through doing so, you can accumulate a vast amount of merit. The second is the protectors, who are the recipients who possess qualities, and the qualities that they possess are their ability to bestow protection upon you. The third class of recipients are your karmic creditors, those beings to whom you owe some kind of karmic debt. This includes those who have spite towards you because of these karmic debts. These beings, who may be pretas or beings of other realms, are beings who wish to harm you and others. In large part, their wish to do so comes from the fact that in previous lives, the beings that they wish to harm have withheld food and clothing from them, or have actively stolen the necessities of life from them. They may also be beings to whom you incurred some kind of debt in a previous life that was never repaid. In short, these are beings that hold grudges, and they are the third category of recipients. Then, the fourth category is all sentient beings of the six realms in general. In this context, In this context, they are called the 6 realms, the recipients of compassion, because each and every being of the 6 realms undergoes the particular type of suffering that characterizes their particular realm, and they all are equally deserving of receiving your compassion. In connection with this description of the sur or burnt offerings, one thing has to be clarified. People often fail to make the necessary distinction between what is called sang and what is called sur, both of which tend to be referred to in English as fire puja. A sang means a cleansing offering. It is an offering of smoke, such as the smoke of juniper and also the smoke of grains as well. Mainly, though, it is the smoke of juniper or other coniferous tree branches. This is done in order to cleanse the environment. Sang is generally done in the morning and rarely, if ever, in the evening. The principal idea of a sang or cleansing offering is to enhance the prosperity or richness and purity of the environment or region in which it is done. Therefore, it benefits not only the people taking part in it, but also pleases the local spirits or local deities by purifying any kind of impurity or pollution in the environment. By contrast, sur, the burnt offering, is very rarely done in the morning and is almost invariably done in the evening and has the particular benefits and functions explained above. And then there is another similar practice which is called water torma, which maybe I won't mention, but I wanted to mention these two because perhaps some of you have seen people doing burnt offerings and you're wondering what type of offering it is. And so ones that involve like throwing a lot of substances into the fire, this would probably be something more like sur, which is different from sang, which is when you're burning these juniper branches and you're trying to purify. So one thing I wanted to mention, if anyone is interested in doing sang practice, I do have a short sang text, and so I can share that if anyone might be interested. Okay. So, among these 3 types of practices, sur, the burnt offering, is particularly beneficial for beings in the bardo, the period of time after death. All beings that are born will definitely at some point die, and having died, will pass through the bardo. When you are in the bardo, it is said you have complete senses and the capacity to wander about without impediment. Thus, for the roughly 49-day period of the bardo, you have a physical existence that is similar to that of a preta, and you are only nourished by smells. For example, the smells of things that are burnt. And because of that, the most beneficial thing for those beings that have recently passed away and are in the bardo is to perform the sur offering. At best, it should be done every day of the 49-day period of someone's time in the bardo, or at least from time to time during that period. This practice will help alleviate their suffering from hunger and thirst. This practice will be of great benefit to particular beings to whom it is dedicated, and indeed to all beings who are in the bardo at that time. Now, all of these practices are aspects of the practice of generosity, which means that they are ways of training your mind in the practice of generosity. If you do not train your mind in generosity, if you do not consciously cultivate it, then you will be increasingly afflicted by an inability to give away or even use what you have. Whatever few possessions you have, you will be unable to give them up, and you will hold on to them with an obsessive greed, which can become so intense that you will not even dare to use them yourself. You will be obsessed with what you do not have, and you will constantly say to yourself and perhaps to others, I do not have any food, I do not have any clothes, I do not have any money, I do not have this, I do not have that. You will be unable to use what you do have in offerings to the 3 jewels, in generosity to other beings, or even to make practical use of these things for your own benefit. In short, if you do not cultivate generosity, while you will continue for some time to have a human body, you will have the mind of a preta. For example, I remember that in the news some time ago, there was a story about an elderly woman who was often seen in the subways of New York City during the winter. She was rarely there during the summer, but during the winter, she would be seen begging in the subway stations. After some years of this, she died while begging in the subway. When they looked at her belongings and found out her address, it turned out that she was from New Mexico. She owned a house there and had $50,000 in the bank. She was unable to make use of her own money and her own possessions, but for some reason felt compelled to stay in a freezing subway station in New York City and eventually die there. The point is that if you have resources, at least you should use them to take care of yourself. That is perfectly all right. But to have such resources and not make use of them and then die in misery is pointless. Then, going beyond that, whatever you have, you should make offerings to the 3 jewels and to the needy. This is extremely important. It is so important that it was said by Jetsun Milarepa to always practice generosity, even if you have to take food out of your own mouth in order to do so. If you cannot conquer obsessive selfishness, then even if you came to control all of the wealth in this entire world of Jambudvipa, you would be unsatisfied. Lacking contentment, you would think, well, there must be other planets that I could get more money from. Another situation is where you might think, well, I cannot give up any of my own possessions. I need what I have now, so maybe I'll make some extra money that I can use to make offerings to the 3 jewels or to perform generosity. In that way, you postpone acts of generosity endlessly. Material generosity, the first of the 3 types of generosity, was primarily taught with practitioners who are householders in mind. Householders are people who have families and homes and are using their domestic and general life situations to train in the bodhicittas of aspiration and implementation and to cultivate the 6 perfections. If you are not a householder, meaning that you are an ordained monk or nun, then the lifestyle that is prescribed is to cultivate contentment and austerity in all situations. This means to survive on barely enough, to have a minimum of food and clothing, and a very austere dwelling in solitude, and so on, and to use that type of extremely simplified living situation in order to one-pointedly cultivate the 3 trainings of discipline, meditation, and knowledge. The distinction being made here is that an ordained person, one who is living in an austere way in order to practice dharma fully, should not abandon the austerity of their living situation and the amount of time they spend in practice in order to cultivate wealth that they can thereby use to practice generosity. They should not use the practice of generosity as an excuse to focus less on their training. Thus, for such a person, it is of the utmost importance in all ways and in all situations to cultivate contentment. The second type of material generosity is called great giving. Great giving refers to the giving of material things that are very precious or very rare, such as your most precious possessions. This is explained in terms of giving things that would be very valuable in traditional societies, such as domestic animals, and relinquishing attachment to members of your family, giving precious jewels or extremely precious or costly things, and so forth. And here I'd like to note that we can visualize great giving and imagine ourselves giving away our most precious possessions and all the things that we love. And this is both very meritorious, and then it helps to lessen our attachment. And it's kind of like a crutch if we cannot really be able to give away such important things. We can visualize it, and that's also good. The third category of material generosity is called utmost generosity. And this is something that cannot usually be practiced by ordinary beings. It can only really be done by those who have attained bodhicitta levels. It means giving up your body or parts of your body, such as your limbs and even your life, for the benefit of others. There are well-known examples of this, such as when the Buddha in a previous life was born as the king named Great Courage and fed his own body to a starving tigress. This took place in the region of Nepal that is now known as Namo Buddha. There are other examples, such as when the great Buddhist teacher Arya Nagarjuna offered his very head to somebody. This is what is called the utmost generosity. It should be made clear that other than those who have attained the bodhisattva levels, ordinary beings cannot actually implement this type of generosity. What we can do is aspire to do it in the future by mentally dedicating our lives, our bodies, and so forth to the benefit of other beings. The second major category of generosity is dharmic generosity, or the giving of dharma. This means to bestow empowerments, transmissions, and instructions on others, and in general to encourage others in appropriate ways and acts of virtue. The most important thing when you are practicing the generosity of dharma is that your motivation be correct. This means you should never teach with the attitude, well, I'm teaching these people so I can become famous or prosperous. You should always do it with the attitude that you are trying to teach people what will actually benefit them the most, with the motivation to benefit them and in an appropriate way that they can make use of. The third and final category of generosity is the generosity of protection. This means protecting beings that need it under specific circumstances. In particular, it means protecting beings from serious harm. It can also mean befriending those who lack supportive relationships and so forth. In this category is the saving of lives, which was taught by the Buddha to be the most beneficial type of material virtue. This means that as much as you can, you should save lives, especially animals that would otherwise be killed. For example, if you have the power and influence to do so, it means to protect the lives of animals on a certain mountain or a certain valley, or to save the lives or ransom the lives of other animals that would definitely be killed. So for example, you could adopt a dog from, what is this called, a kill shelter. If you wanted to get a pet or something in the, anyway, you could try to save one's life. Also, maybe he's going to speak about it. One example of this is the easy practice these days, which is to buy and release small animals, such as worms and small fish that are being sold as bait for fishermen. If these are released harmlessly into a natural setting, there is actually a double karmic benefit. Not only are the animals saved from a painful death, but also fewer fish may be caught, saving them as well. I would like to mention that the practice of generosity is essential in the practice of Vajrayana, which indeed must always take place within the Mahayana outlook. In fact, generosity is one of the root commitments of the Vajrayana. When you take the Vajrayana Samaya of the 5 families, in particular when you take the Samayas of the Ratna or Jewel family, you say, I will continually cultivate the 4 generosities. The 4 generosities are the 3 generosities that were just mentioned and the generosity of loving kindness. The second of the 6 perfections is morality. This also has 3 aspects: the morality of abstention from evil, the morality of the implementation of virtue, and the morality of benefiting beings. The first of these is the morality, which is abstention from evil or wrongdoing, and this means to rigorously abstain from any kind of wrongdoing with body, speech, and mind activities that are of no help to others and only bring them harm. The general categorization of wrongdoing as the 10 non-virtuous actions of body, speech, and mind, which are killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, divisive talk, harsh talk, idle talk, craving or coveting, ill will, and then wrong view. And if we divide them by our 3 gates, the first 3, killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct, have to do with the body, and then lying, divisive talk, harsh talk, and idle talk are non-virtues of our speech, and then craving, ill will, and the wrong view or wrong views have to do with non-virtues of mind. So, those are that all has to do with the perfection of morality. Then, the second type of morality is the morality of the implementation of virtue, which means accumulating virtuous actions. This means to engage in all kinds of virtue and never to neglect a virtuous action because it seems too insignificant. The reason that it is necessary for us to be so painstaking in our implementation of virtuous actions, even ones that seem insignificant, is that, as it is said, we must cultivate virtue intentionally with all of our faculties, such as our speech and so on. Because we are automatically accumulating negative actions all the time merely by walking around. That's why we have to strive so hard to do small acts of virtue. This means that we cannot help but do unvirtuous things simply through being alive. As human beings, we are not the biggest sentient being that there is, but from the point of view of an insect, we are very big. Every time you walk, you step on insects and kill them. And every time you sit down, we are killing things. Therefore, minor acts of virtue, such as reciting mantras like Om Mani Padme Hum, turning prayer wheels, and so on, help to intentionally counteract these types of negative actions that we are always engaging in. Actually, now that makes me think, if you've ever been around like older Tibetan people, you'll notice that they're constantly praying. And I always wondered why they do that all the time. And maybe it's because we're always committing acts of non-virtue. In short, it is necessary to maintain mindfulness and alertness as much as you can and to be careful in all of your actions. We must be careful to avoid that which is harmful to others and to adopt that which is helpful, because if you are careless, then even in an attempt to play a joke, you can actually accumulate a serious amount of negativity. The idea that we are constantly and usually unknowingly killing beings was taught by the Buddha. Although this notion is present in the Buddhist teaching, we do not need to merely rely on the Buddha's statements about it. It can be clearly seen from a scientific point of view as well. We know that every time we wash our hands or every time we take medicine for a minor ailment, we are killing lots of bacteria. Since we cannot live without killing or seriously harming sentient beings, we need to counteract this through the practice of virtue. We should never think that a small act of wrongdoing is harmless. A small negative act can bring ruin, just as one spark can burn down a huge haystack. On the other hand, a small act of virtue can bring great benefit. So if you constantly maintain mindfulness and alertness, you will constantly find opportunities to perform acts of virtue that will bring about a great accumulation of virtue or merit. For example, when you are walking along a road or a path, you can always move insects out of the path where they would be killed. In such ways, we have constant opportunities to save lives. With all this in mind, you should not look down on even small virtuous actions. Remember that even small drops of water will eventually fill a huge pot. And if you continuously practice these small virtuous actions, you can eventually accumulate vast amounts of merit. Small virtuous actions, even if unintentional, accumulate merit. For example, there is a story that at one time a pig was walking along a road, and on the side of the road was a stupa. The pig, of course, had no intention whatsoever of circumambulating that stupa, but walking along the same road was a dog, which also had no intention of circumambulating the stupa. But when the dog saw the dog started chasing the pig, and running around, they both ended up circumambulating the stupa. It is said that they both accumulated vast amounts of merit from that. Since there are constant opportunities to accumulate wrongdoing and virtue, we must therefore always keep in mind the importance of abandoning even the smallest wrongdoing and practicing even the smallest virtue. As well, we must dedicate the merit of doing both to the awakening of all beings. Moving on to number 3. The third aspect of morality is the morality of benefiting beings, which refers to the motivation behind what we do. Essentially, it is the morality of constantly maintaining the altruistic motivation of doing whatever you do for the benefit of others and not for your own profit. For beginners, the most important thing in connection with morality is to practice as much virtue as you can, to abandon as much wrongdoing as you can, and to dedicate the virtue of it to the spiritual awakening of all beings without exception. Why is it taught that the most important thing for beginners to practice is the practice of virtue and the dedication of that virtue to all beings? The reason is that in order to be of actual direct benefit to beings, in the specific sense of liberating them or teaching dharma to them, you need to really have the ability to do so. The ability to do that is something more than just being able to communicate the dharma based on your own understanding. An understanding that could in fact be quite uncertain. To be able to benefit beings by teaching dharma and guiding them towards liberation in that way requires that you have such ability that your own qualities and understanding are like an inexhaustible treasury. If your understanding is uncertain, then your communication of the dharma to others will have the effect of pouring out the contents of the vase of your own understanding into the vase of other beings' minds, and you will be left empty and hollow. If your understanding is really stable, then it is like an inexhaustible treasury. No matter how much dharma you pour out to others, you will never become empty, you will be unaffected, and your qualities will be undiminished. In the practice of virtue, it is also of the utmost importance to combine all virtuous actions with what are called the three excellences. The first is excellence in the beginning, which is the proper motivation. This is established by going for refuge and generating bodhicitta at the beginning of the practice session. The second is the excellence of non-conceptuality during the practice itself, which refers to engaging in the main practice, whatever it may be, without distractions and conceptuality. And the third is the excellence of dedication, which refers to the dedication and aspiration for the enlightenment of all beings at the end of the session. The third of the 6 perfections is patience, which also has 3 varieties. The first is patience or forbearance with the abuse of others. The second is patience with the austerities of dharma practice, and the third is patience or tolerance for the inconceivably profound meaning. The first of these 3 kinds of patience refers to how you deal with the situation where you are being harmed by someone. This harm could be done directly to you or more indirectly, otherwise known as behind your back. The direct harm is a situation where someone physically hurts you, verbally abuses you, steals your possessions, or destroys something that belongs to you. The abuse of harming you behind your back would be, for example, when someone says that you said something you did not say, or that you did something you did not do, and so on. In either case, the practice of patience with the abuse is not to become angry at the person, but to generate loving kindness and compassion for them, and to try your best to help them. In the particular situation we each find ourselves in, whether it is relating to family members, engaging in our professional or work life, or living together and working at a dharma center in a close community, we obviously have an excellent opportunity for practicing this first type of patience. As it is said, if there is nothing that could make you angry, how could you cultivate patience? Since we have lots of situations in which we would tend to otherwise become angry, we have lots of situations in which we can cultivate the perfection of patience. Especially, we need to acknowledge that we all have a complete set of the 5 root kleshas, or the mental afflictions. As ordinary beings, none of us has attained Buddhahood. Therefore, there are constant conflicts. At the same time, while we all have a complete set of kleshas, which are also called the 5 poisons, everyone's set is slightly different. Thus, we have different proportions of these patterns. Some people have tremendous pride. Other people have tremendous anger, and so on. It would be perhaps even more difficult if we all had the same proportions of these negative qualities. if we all, for example, had tremendous anger. However, we are all a little bit different, and so the situation can be worked on. To take an example, let's say that there was one person in the community who had a real problem with anger, who was constantly getting angry for every little reason. If nobody understood that pattern, then when that person got angry at us, we would be horribly shocked and unsettled by it. However, if as a community we understood that this person had a tremendous problem with anger, then we would in fact be prepared to deal with that situation. As well, when you know beforehand that this person has such a problem with anger, then when they get angry, you would be prepared for that. At that point, your reaction really depends on you. If you are a practitioner, then when he or she comes under the power of anger once again, you have the opportunity to recognize the fact that you have a great opportunity to apply the appropriate remedy to the situation. When someone becomes angry with you, if you respond with anger, then it is like pouring oil on fire. His or her anger will grow and the situation will get worse. If you respond with patience, which does not mean that you will not feel angry, because of course you have the klesha of anger yourself. It means that you will not allow yourself to be controlled by your anger. If you respond with that kind of patience, then the other person's anger will tend to fall flat, because their anger is like a drumstick that they are holding up like a club. They need a drum to beat it on in order to make noise. If you do not give them the drum by not falling under the power of your own anger, then they cannot really make that much noise. This means that you will benefit yourself greatly through strengthening by the habit of patience. And you also benefit the other person by allowing for the pacification of their anger. Living in the world with work, family, and community involvements, we have a tremendous and constant opportunity to practice this discipline of patience. If you can practice it, if you can avoid returning anger towards others when they are angry with you, then you can accumulate vast amounts of merit simply by doing that. As it is said in the Bodhicharya Avatara, all of the merit of generosity and of offerings to the Buddhas that have been performed over 100 eons is destroyed in one instant of strong anger. Therefore, since anger is the greatest of all evils, practice patience, and that will be the greatest virtue. As it is said, as there is no evil like anger, there is no virtuous austerity like patience. So therefore, seek to cultivate patience in all ways and in all situations. Understanding this, we will see the importance of continually keeping the defects of anger in mind, as well as the benefits of patience and of trying to cultivate patience in all difficult situations. It is said that there is no wrongdoing like anger, and there is no virtue like patience. The point of this is that, while anger is the worst of the kleshas, it is something that is part of our makeup, and therefore it is the case that we are going to continue to get angry. So, the practice of patience requires some effort. Therefore, it is an act of virtue. Or we could say, it is austerity because it is non-indulgence. Therefore, if you can maintain patience, even in situations that would normally make you angry, then you are cultivating one of the greatest virtues that there is. You should do this using any method you can. It was said by Padampa Sangye, the experiences of others as enemies is a confused projection, so relinquish spite towards your enemies, people of Jingri. And Jingri is a place in Tibet. In a similar vein, Atisha said, do not get angry at those who harm you. If you get angry at those who harm you, then when will you find the opportunity to practice patience? Therefore, when people abuse you verbally or physically, or make false accusations about your behavior and so on, neither react on the spot with fury nor hold a grudge. If you can stop reacting immediately and holding grudges, then you have found a way to remove a great deal of your previous wrongdoings and obscurations. If you can cultivate patience continually, so that you are not overpowered by your anger, then you will accumulate vast amounts of merit. At best, you should see those who harm you as your guru. in which case, by reflecting upon the fact that they are the supreme basis for your cultivation of loving kindness, compassion, and patience, you will understand that they are like your teachers or gurus. This is the best attitude to take, but it is very difficult. If you cannot take precisely that attitude, then at least you should try to be able to reflect that such aggression from others is a necessary condition for your practice of patience, and have that degree of gratitude. From the way we think about people and speak about them, it is clear that anger is really the greatest fault. For example, we might speak of someone we know and say, well, he's really very bright, and he's certainly very diligent in practice, but he gets angry all the time. And that implies that we cannot just deal with him. From seeing how we react to people who are angry, it is clear that anger is the most serious defect, the most devastating klesha of the mind. The fact is that you cannot really be a good person and be angry at the same time. It was said by Padamba Sangye that 100 karmas accumulated through desire do not equal 100 negative karma accumulated through anger. For this reason, it is taught that people who are really trying to practice dharma properly need to be as gentle and fluffy as soft cotton in their conduct of body, speech, and mind. This image is used because no matter how you handle or touch unspun cotton, it always feels soft. A practitioner needs to be like that, in the sense that no matter what the situation is, he or she is always gentle. If you do even a little bit of practice and maintain a little bit of inner commitment to this, and are without arrogance about it, then, even by doing that much, you can pacify your body, speech, and mind, and make them be gentle. The point of doing practice is to be able to tame ourselves in this way. If this is not what happens, if practice does not tame your body, speech, and mind, then even if you have some qualities, such as having some knowledge of the Dharma or having done a certain amount of practice, you will have tremendous arrogance about it. You will constantly be thinking, well, I have meditated upon such and such deities. I have recited so many mantras and met such and such lamas, and so on. And you will be comparing yourself to others. You will think, well, they do not do these practices. They do not know this much about the Dharma. They have not met with such and such lamas, and so on. This arrogance will make your mind so tight that when someone says one word to you that seems to be kind of different from your opinion, you will immediately explode in anger, because you are completely paranoid. Everything everyone says will seem like some kind of put down or subtle criticism. In short, you will always be ready to blow up. You will always be on the brink of anger. If you become like this, even though you are practicing the Dharma, it means that the Dharma and your mind have from the very beginning been completely unconnected, and that none of the practice you have done has accomplished the slightest benefit whatsoever for you. It was said by Yeshe Chengawa, when people practice hearing, reflection, and meditation upon the Buddha Dharma, and yet, while they are doing so, their obsession with their imputed self grows stronger and stronger, their patience diminishes to the size of a pea, and they become more irritable than trolls. This indicates that their practice is in some way faulty. Geshe Chengawa continues by saying, rather than that, always keep low, which means always maintain a low position to prevent the development of arrogance or pride. The quote continues, wear rags. This does not literally mean you should always walk around wearing rags. It means that you should not be too attached to clothing and should regard clothing as functional. It goes on, place all above you, good, bad, or in between. This does not mean that you should literally treat everyone the way you would treat your teachers. It means that you should not compare yourself with others and should respect everyone without trying to divide people into those you think are better than you and those you think are worse than you. He concludes, but keep love, compassion, and bodhicitta as the essence of your Dharma. Rather than running after profound views and high words, taking patience as the essence of your practice will be more effective. The second type of patience is having patience with the austerities involved in Dharma practice. And this made me think of our own teacher, Bardatuga Rinpoche, and how he demonstrated great patience and forbearance during the many years it took to build this center. What was it, like 15 years? Something like that. And how many of you also helped to build it. And it brought it up here because of the patience it takes to teach the Dharma and everything that is involved with that, like building Dharma centers that we can now enjoy. So, the basic idea is that in order to practice effectively, you have to accept the hardships that practice will entail, the experience of heat and cold, hunger and thirst, and so on. As an example of this, it is said in the Tantras that we should be willing to cross the ravines of fire and razors in order to find the Dharma. There is a quote from Jetsun Milarepa that expresses the wish to have this kind of patience. He said, to be without people asking after my health if I'm ill, and to die without people coming to view my body, and to die in this place of retreat. If I can accomplish these things, then the wishes of this yogi will be fully accomplished. To have no footprints at my door, and no blood left inside my cave, and if I can die in this place of retreat, then the wishes of this yogi will be completely accomplished. If no one will ask where I went, and if I have no idea where I'm going, if I can die in this place of retreat, the wishes of this yogi will be fully accomplished. If my rotting corpse is consumed by insects, and my muscles and sinews sucked dry by flies, and if I can die in this place of retreat, then the wishes of this yogi will be fully accomplished. The line about having no footprints at my door and no blood left inside my cave means that his body will have been completely consumed by wild animals such that nothing goes to waste. The whole quotation is an expression of the best kind of patience and renunciation in relation to practice. Of course, if you are the best type of practitioner, then you can literally emulate Jetsun Milarepa's example. It is important, however, to distinguish between a sincere natural inclination towards a fully renunciant lifestyle and what could be called ephemeral renunciation. Ephemeral renunciation occurs when we first meet our teachers and we become tremendously inspired by what we hear and what we see. And then for a moment, we forget the world entirely and we want to just be like Milarepa. We run off to a cave somewhere and we try our best in our feeble way to imitate Milarepa's mode of conduct. We might last a week or so, but by that time we are so hungry and cold that we are completely miserable. We remember the world and end up running back to it. Rather than that, it is much better to start slowly with a gradual and regular practice. By developing your practice in that way, you can eventually come to develop a full certainty about the Dharma, at which point you will never turn back in your practice. That is the best way to emulate Jetsun Milarepa. The third type of patience is not being afraid of the profound meaning. This means that when you hear an explanation of the nature of things, of emptiness, rather than getting upset or scared about it, you learn to understand it in its proper context and to relate to it. This actually can be a problem. For example, there is a story about two Indian monks who came to receive teachings from Lord Atisha. He began to explain to them the first aspect of emptiness, which is the selflessness of persons. When he explained the selflessness of persons to them, they said, "That's wonderful and very profound, and thank you for explaining that." Then Atisha went on to explain the other half of emptiness, which is the selflessness of things and the non-inherent existence of all phenomena. When he got to that point, they became very frightened, and they actually blocked their ears. They said, "Do not say that. Do not say stuff like that." Atisha was somewhat disappointed by their reaction. He said later that although those two were very good monks, The problem was that, not having trained their minds in loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, they could not hear or understand the profound dharma. That being the case, there was not much use in their merely having a monastic lifestyle. The point of not being afraid of the profound meaning means not to close your ears to the truth. Thus, the third type of patience, the patience of not being afraid of emptiness, is very important. The fourth perfection is diligence, and it has three aspects, which are the diligence that is like armor, the diligence of application, and what is known as the diligence that is never content. The first of the three types of diligence is armor-like diligence. Essentially, this means not being timid with regard to the austerities of practice. When you reflect on the lives of the great teachers and the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the past, and you reflect upon their austerities and their deeds, you may have doubts that you can follow their example. You may think, well, they are Buddhas and Bodhisattvas after all, and so of course they can do those things. Ordinary people like myself could not possibly follow their example. This type of timidity is not appropriate. You should rather think that it is through those deeds and those austerities that those teachers attain their siddhi or attainment. Since we are following their example, it is the case that we must follow their example in all ways. Perhaps we cannot do better than they did, but at least we should try our best to apply the same diligence. Furthermore, if they were bodhisattvas and needed to engage in such austerities in order to attain awakening, how much more must we, who are ordinary beings? In short, an attitude of courage towards these austerities and great deeds is the diligence that is like armor. Therefore, the attitude that expresses this armor-like diligence would be, well, I do not have much of a natural residue of training from previous lives, so therefore I must work very, very hard and must engage in all manner of great deeds and austerities. As well, we should take the attitude, at this time in which I have acquired the precious human existence, with its freedoms and resources, have met qualified teachers, and have received the most profound instructions of all dharma, how could I not make use of it with the utmost diligence? That kind of stable, courageous commitment is also an aspect of armor-like diligence. The second type of diligence is the diligence of application, which means that you immediately apply this commitment to practice rather than procrastinating. It is very easy for us to have the wish, perhaps an intense wish, to practice, but to think that the conditions are not right, and therefore we will say, I will practice tomorrow, or I will practice next year. But if you maintain an attitude of procrastination, then day by day your life will be used up. Therefore, do not spend your life wishing to practice, but actually apply it. It was said by the Drupchen Pemokarpo that a human life is really like the situation of an animal that is about to be butchered. In every moment, we get closer and closer to our deaths. So to think we will practice later today or tomorrow will cause us one day to end up lying on our deathbed knowing that we are about to die without ever having practiced. Therefore, you should practice as soon as you have the opportunity to do so. In short, you should never allow your wish to practice to be corrupted by the habit of procrastination. How should you relate to practice? Traditionally, it is said that you should relate to it with the urgency of a young man into whose lap a snake has just fallen, or a beautiful woman who notices that her hair has suddenly caught on fire. If you do not take this attitude of urgency or priority, then your mundane responsibilities, which are your primary concern at this time, will never be satisfied. There will never come a time when you will have fulfilled all of your responsibilities because one mundane involvement produces another, like waves on the surface of water. Thus, if you keep on waiting for your responsibilities to be completely fulfilled, there will never come a time for you to practice. The only way to complete your responsibilities is to cast them aside decisively. About this, the omniscient Longchenpa said, ordinarily, the only time you will ever finish with mundane endeavors is at the moment of your death. But you can be finished with them by abandoning them. All of these things we do, and that we are so busy with, are really like the games of children. Therefore, when you generate the wish to practice, then, rather than allowing yourself to be carried away by procrastination, exhort yourself with the recollection of impermanence, and never defer practice for any future time. That type of immediate application of the wish to practice is the diligence of application. Now, this third type of diligence is very important for me to hear, and I don't know about you guys. But the third type of diligence is the diligence of never being satisfied, or never being content with your degree of virtue. This means never to rest on your laurels. It means never to think, I've done this much retreat, meditated on these deities, or done this much recitation, and that is enough. I do not need to do any more. Rather, the diligence of never being satisfied is to take the attitude that you will practice as vigorously as possible until the day you die. It means to take the attitude that you will use this life in order to attain full awakening in this life and in this body, and that you will practice without fluctuation, strongly and constantly like the current of a river, day and night, until you attain Buddhahood. The traditional example for this kind of diligence is that it is like the way a hungry yak goes about eating grass. At the moment that the yak is munching on one mouthful of grass, he is already looking to see where the next one will come from. In the same way, when you are doing practice, you should not have the attitude, when I finish this practice, that is enough. I will not have to do any more of this. Instead, you should think, when I'm done with this, then I will begin the next one, and so on, so that there is an attitude that goes throughout your life of never allowing your body, speech, and mind to rest, but applying them constantly in a gradually increasing and intensifying diligence. It was said by the Vidyadhara Dujum Lingpa, if your diligence in practice increases as you come closer and closer to the time of death, this is a sign that you are a practitioner who has not been spoiled by the frost. The image of spoiled by the frost is taken from farming. Sometimes a farmer will have some very good crops that are growing up, but then they are killed by frost. In the same way, it is possible that a practitioner might be very diligent in the beginning, but then gradually their diligence would wear down and they would burn out. What he is pointing out here is that a good practitioner will not do this, but will become more and more diligent as time goes on. The situation, which in the previous quotation was called a practitioner killed by frost, is something we need to watch out for. It is a particular type of defect that can occur. Sometimes in our initial involvement with the practice, we begin a situation that is basically an ideal opportunity for practice, where we have almost unlimited access to many great teachers. As time goes on, we become somewhat spoiled or jaded by this. We start to take dharma for granted, and the result of this jadedness is that we become impervious to the dharma, at which point we are impervious to the benefit of the dharma, of any teacher or any teaching. This is a real problem that actually can and does occur. Instead of letting this happen, we should take the attitude that until we attain full Buddhahood, we still obviously have karma and habitual patterns to purify. We still need to develop the qualities of the various levels of the path and so forth. Therefore, there is no reason to stop practicing. We should not have the attitude that, well, I'll practice when it is convenient, and I will not practice when it is not convenient. And maybe I will start again later, and then it will become convenient again. Instead, we should practice continuously. This type of continual attitude, of never being satisfied with however much practice we have done, is the third type of diligence, the diligence of never being satisfied with your degree of virtue. The fifth of the 6 perfections is the perfection of dhyana, or meditative stability. Among the 6 perfections, this is perhaps the one we normally speak about the most. The first thing to understand about meditative stability is that it cannot be developed in any true way in the midst of distractions and disturbance. it is necessary that there be an external isolation or solitude of body which can produce an internal isolation or solitude of mind. Therefore, the first step in cultivating meditative stability is to protect yourself from distractions and disturbances of all kinds. It was said by the Tibetan master Repa Shiwa-o, being alone is the basis for Buddhahood. Having one companion in accordance with the dharma is a support for the cultivation of virtue. Having 3 or 4 or more is a cause of nothing other than attachment and aversion. Therefore, I remain alone. The point here is that attachment and desire are the greatest source of impediments to the development of fundamental meditative stability. As long as you are not content with whatever you have, as long as you wish for more than what you have, and as long as you are afflicted by this, your mind cannot rest. Furthermore, the more you have, the more you want. Therefore, in order to develop shamatha, you need to have contentment that is free of greed. It was said by Arya Nagarjuna that wealth is the cause of all disturbance, because initially you have to gather it, secondly, you have to protect it, and then once you have protected it, you become obsessed with increasing it. It is the characteristic of the wealthy to be avaricious and greedy. On the other hand, if you are content with whatever you have, then as long as you have sufficient food and clothing, you really need nothing more. In short, the development of meditative stability of shamatha, isolation, is necessary in order to develop it. Simply by going to a place of isolation or solitude, your kleshas will be pacified, and it is easy in such an environment to develop all of the qualities of the path. For that reason, isolation or solitude is absolutely necessary in order to practice meditation. The actual practice of meditative stability has 3 aspects. 1, ordinary meditative stability. 2, the meditative stability of discrimination. And 3, the meditative stability of the Buddhas. The first of these 3, ordinary meditation, is sometimes called childish goal-oriented meditation. It is defined as any meditative state in which you are intentionally trying to acquire or experience the positive experiences of bliss, clarity, and non-conceptuality, and any state in which you become attached to those experiences as they arise. The second type of meditation is called the meditation of discrimination. At this level, you are free from attachment to what is literally called the taste. You are free from attachment to what is literally called the taste or flavor of meditation experience itself, such as the experiences of bliss, clarity, and non-conceptuality. However, having been freed from those experiences, you are attached to the remedy, namely the experience of emptiness. The third type of meditation, the meditation of the Buddhas, is where you have not only freed yourself from fixation on experience, you have freed yourself from fixation on emptiness and have come to rest in that great non-conceptuality which is the direct realization of dharmata. Then, and finally, the 6th perfection is the perfection of prana, or knowledge, also known as wisdom. And it has 3 aspects. These are the knowledge from hearing, the knowledge from reflection, and the knowledge arising from meditation. The first of these 3 types of prana is the prana that arises from hearing the dharma, which means that the words and the meaning of these words are expressed by your teacher, and that you listen to this and you understand it. The second prana is the prana of reflection or consideration, which is that you do not simply stop with having heard the dharma from your teacher, but you scrutinize, consider, or question the meaning of what you have heard. You do so until you get to the point where you have revealed and resolved any misunderstandings on your part, any lack of clarity in what you have heard. At that point, you do not merely know the information, but you understand it so thoroughly that when you later go into isolated retreat, you have no need whatsoever to consult anyone. Third is the prana that arises from meditation. This comes about by having first eradicated a lack of knowledge or lack of understanding through hearing the Dharma, and second, having revealed the meaning of the Dharma through careful analysis or scrutiny, and then finally, applying what you have come to understand through the previous two stages in intense practice in isolated retreat. Through this intense application of what you have received in your own experience, then you gradually come to realize the nature of all things. This realization or understanding is not something that is acquired externally. It is an internal resolution, such that you have a full discernment of the nature of things. You know exactly how things are without any doubts or hesitation. Let's look at how this prana of meditation arises in a more detailed way. Having eradicated any kind of conceptual doubt or misunderstanding about the nature of things through hearing and reflection, then you actually practice or implement this understanding in meditation. In doing so, you resolve that the nature of all external appearances, forms, sounds, smells, tastes, and tactile sensations, are appearances that arise in your experience as projections based on confusion. In other words, they are appearances without any true existence. And in that sense, appearances can be described by a set of 8 analogies that are traditionally used for magical illusions. We relied on this in the morning as well. The first of these is that they are like dreams, and that they appear without having any true existence. The second is that they are like magical illusions, and that they arise based upon various circumstances having come together, but without actually existing as they appear to exist. The third is that they are like optical illusions, and that they are appearances of things that do not exist at all. The fourth is that they are like mirages, in that while appearing, they have no substantial or true reality that corresponds to the characteristics of their mode of appearance. The fifth is that they are like echoes, in that while they appear, they are not actually present, either outside or inside. The sixth is that they are like a city of Gandharvas, and that neither the subjective nor objective aspects of the experience have true existence, neither the supporting nor the supported. The seventh is that they are like reflections in mirrors, in that they are vivid appearances without any substantial essence or nature. The eighth is that they are like magically emanated cities or dwellings, and that they can arise in an unlimited variety of modes of appearances without any of those varieties being what they truly are or having any true existence. In short, through meditation, you come to recognize that all of the external appearances are without true substantiality, and that they are like these 8 analogies for illusion. They are forms of which the nature is emptiness, forms that are the display of emptiness. Thus you will come to understand that all of the objects of experience are deceptive and false in that sense. Then there is a further recognition concerning that which experiences these appearances, the mind itself. Through examining the mind's nature, you will come to recognize that the subjective aspect of experience, what we call the mind, is also without substantial existence. Thus, not only will your fixated conceptualization of the inherent existence of objects be pacified, you will also abide without any fixation on the subjective experiencer, and will rest in the nature of things, dharmata, which is a space-like unity of clarity or lucidity and emptiness. Having realized it, to rest in that is the prana paramita, the perfection of knowledge. These last 2 perfections, the perfections of meditation and knowledge, correspond directly to the 2 qualities and to the 2 qualities that develop in meditation practice, namely shamatha and vipassana. The fifth perfection, meditation, corresponds to shamatha, and the 6th corresponds to vipassana. Both of these, and especially prana, are difficult to talk about and have to be experienced through gradual training and practice. However, the fact that they are difficult to talk about or difficult to understand merely through hearing about them does not mean that they are impossible to realize. They can be realized by going through the stages of gradual training. It should be understood, though, that the manner of realization of these latter two does not arise through the acquisition of information, but it arises from within, through the power of your own training. As was sung by Lord Marpa in one of his songs, even if all the Buddhas of the 3 times were to appear before me, I would not have a single question to ask any one of them. When realization comes, it arises from within. So that was the wonderful chapter on the 6 perfections. I'm very glad that elaboration could be there, because I know this morning it was really bare bones. So I hope that helped. Let's see. So, another text that I thought we might be able to rely on a bit is this one called Timeless Treasures, which I pointed out this morning. And if you're interested, I hope you'll be able to find a copy. But in any case, it was published quite a while ago. Let's see. Well, it says 2012. But there are a couple portions in here that go over some of the information we went over this morning, such as setting the proper motivation and also proper conduct. And so I thought we might hear about that as well, if you guys don't mind. Okay. So this is about motivation and conduct. Before receiving the Buddha's instructions, whether you are listening to a live teaching or recording, reading a book, or even reviewing your own notes, it is vital to generate a pure frame of mind. Specifically, the pure frame of mind in this context refers to faultless motivation and conduct. Faultless motivation refers to bodhicitta, the mind of awakening. Bodhicitta is the motivation whereby we listen to the teachings of the Dharma not only for the sake of our personal well-being, but to become able to benefit the limitless number of sentient beings through fully integrating the Dharma into our lives. Bodhicitta is the motivation to receive the teachings to help others and to be able to share whatever inspiration and benefit one receives through the teachings. We aspire to establish all beings in the experience of the awakened mind, the state of Buddhahood. Faultless conduct entails the mental attitude you should cultivate whenever you are taking in the Dharma, whether by listening to a teaching, reading, or any other form of input. A traditional presentation on the optimal attitude for listening to the Buddha Dharma explains that you should be free of the 3 faults. These 3 faults are illustrated by 3 kinds of vessels or containers. The first fault, inattentiveness, is like an overturned vessel. Nothing can flow in. To counter this fault, you take an active interest in the teachings, appreciating their true value and connecting with the natural joy and gratitude that comes from that. The second fault is not retaining the teachings. That is being like a vessel with holes in the bottom. Anything that flows in just as readily leaks out again. This kind of forgetfulness stems from not having sufficient devotion for the Buddha's words. Devotion is an important and often misunderstood principle. It is the most common translation of the Tibetan mogu, a compound term that joins both reverence and gratitude. In brief, the reverence and gratitude comprising devotion relate to 2 points. In the context of devotion to the Buddha, reverence refers to the truly extraordinary qualities of the Buddha and his teachings. Gratitude relates to the great kindness of the Buddha in following the path with immense dedication, then teaching it with utmost skill for the sake of all beings. That is what devotion is, in a nutshell. Heartfelt reverence and gratitude tied to the excellent qualities of the object of devotion and appreciation for the benefit of their kindness and what it has brought us. Faith, in turn, refers not to a static, externally imposed requirement, but a natural threefold progression of trust born from the understanding gained through listening to and contemplating the teachings, as well as the conviction earned through experiencing their impact on our lives. The 3 steps consist of confidence, longing faith, and appreciative faith. Listening to the Buddha's teachings with devotion and faith frees us from the second fault. The third fault is unworthy motives. It is compared to a structurally sound vessel, upright and intact, which is nevertheless tainted with poison. Anything that flows in is retained, but is immediately contaminated, becoming toxic. To overcome this fault, when listening to the genuine Dharma, you need to be free of unworthy motives, which refers to being sidetracked by emotional afflictions or the kleshas. So that is what we should keep in mind when we're listening to the Dharma. Maybe some of you have heard the vessel analogy before, but I think it's a nice way to speak about how to listen to and to contemplate the Dharma. Another important little part of this book is about taming the mind. I thought I might share that too. What is the core of this extensive body of teaching, of all of the Buddha's 84,000 teachings? A central aim of the teaching of the Buddha is subduing the klesha, or our afflictions. There are many ways to explain the kleshas, which is a Sanskrit word, but a good working definition is that kleshas are mental states that disturb the intrinsic serenity of the mind. Typically, we experience kleshas as emotional affliction, for example, anger, greed, delusion, desire, jealousy, and pride. Pacifying the kleshas yields inner peace. The Buddha encapsulated the entire corpus of his own teachings with remarkable brevity. He said, "Do not the slightest harm. Practice virtue in abundance. Tame your mind to perfection." Easy to say and hard to do. The Buddha's teachings supplement this concise statement, detailing what it means to engage in virtuous action and avoid harm. He explains how to lessen and eventually put an end to negative habits and to cultivate instead habits aimed at securing genuine benefit for others and oneself. He mentions his methods depend on mindfulness and restraint, bringing awareness and caution to what we do in all the variety of situations we confront. To understand why the Buddha places such an emphasis on avoiding negative action, cultivating positive conduct, and taming the mind, it is vital to comprehend our condition in its current state and contrast it with what the Buddha teaches about our true nature. I like this portion because it has one of my favorite Buddhist teachings, the one about taming the mind completely. I also think that that's a great one to highlight when starting to talk about the Buddha Dharma, because I feel that all of the Buddhist teachings are simply teaching us how to not harm others, how to practice virtue ourselves, and methods to tame our own mind. And then there's a short section here on what it means to be a Buddhist, and also it explains the term for Buddhist, which I think people usually like to hear about in terms of the Tibetan word and what it means. So I thought I might share that too. A straightforward understanding of what being a Buddhist means, then, is to engage in a seamless process of learning about your true nature and the fundamental nature of things. This does not require a dramatic alteration of your lifestyle in the sense that many people assume. Following the Buddha Dharma does not require rigid adherence to dogma, wearing unfamiliar clothes, or behaving in ways that are not in tune with your culture and your customs. Nor does being a Buddhist require drastic reconfiguration of your life, such that we can no longer take responsibility for caring for our family, community, or environment. This is not what being a Buddhist means. The Tibetan word for Buddhist, Nangpa, reflects this emphasis on the inner plane. It literally means insider or indweller, in the sense of someone who primarily orients their attention inward to understand the relationship between the perceiving mind and the perceived appearances, or the perceived world. Buddhism prioritizes looking inward to work with one's perceiving mind. What does that mean? Among religions and philosophical traditions, some place their faith on external things as the focus of their path of liberation. Buddhism, by contrast, does not reference any external source as its primary focus. Liberation is not something bestowed upon us, nor something we find outside ourselves, over which our mind has no control. Rather, Buddhists look to mind as the source of discontentment, turning attention inward to our consciousness as the focus of our liberating path. Beings all experience both suffering and happiness and assume external conditions, and they assume that external conditions are responsible. The Buddha inverts this idea, teaching that mind, not external things, is the source of either happiness or suffering. When we understand mind as the primary cause for the inadequacies of samsara, we can work with those defects so that their hold on our mind genuinely diminishes and eventually ceases. When we are honest with ourselves, we discover that we are basically discontent, even if we are fortunate enough to enjoy positive external circumstances. We blame the world or others for any discomfort we encounter, whether we are experiencing small problems or great suffering. We believe the world is responsible for the fleeting pleasures we experience, and we try to protect our territory. We are still habituated to believing that outer causes and conditions are solely responsible for our suffering or our happiness. Since we are not genuinely happy and falsely assume outer conditions are responsible, our mind reflexively turns outward in an attempt to satisfy our needs. We think the world must change if we are to be content. Under these circumstances, turning our attention inward, even in the pursuit of enlightenment, feels profoundly uncomfortable. Nevertheless, this is what the Buddha teaches we must do. We must realize our true nature. This is the ultimate aim of Buddhist practice. But how do we realize our nature? All religions employ different approaches to engaging a path of practice. One approach is firmly grounded in confidence or sheer faith that followers develop. In other words, the path to well-being in this kind of system is based on belief. Other approaches place a premium on analytical reasoning to accomplish that aim. While there are different approaches even within Buddhism, the principal approach to practice is one that grounds faith in reason. Normally, practitioners first acquire correct philosophical understanding through study and reasoning. That intellectual understanding is then integrated into one's life through meditative practice. The Tibetan term for spiritual practice is nyamlen, which literally means to take into practice. Thus, Buddhist practice aims at taking the view gained through study and reasoning into experience through meditation. From this, a grounded experiential faith develops. Buddhism does not present a system of dogmas or rules we must blindly believe in order to participate. Rather, the teachings explain the fundamental nature of reality as the Buddha presented it. Practice, then, consists of studying and analyzing these teachings to develop intellectual understanding, then meditating on that understanding, cultivating familiarity with it to integrate it into experience. What does any of this have to do with the aim of benefiting beings? The Buddhist approach is to recognize the volatility of our current state of mind and focus on purifying and developing it prior to attempting to help others. The 37 practices of bodhisattvas puts this well. Deficient in discipline, you cannot help even yourself. So yearning to benefit others is mere folly. Therefore, without concern for cyclic existence, to guard moral discipline is the practice of bodhisattvas. The help we can offer to the needy, whether physically, verbally, or mentally, is maximized by training our own mind. From the sphere of a disciplined mind, we are able to benefit others without self-interest getting in the way. And I personally like that piece because sometimes it feels like, perhaps compared to other religions, like especially when there are religions that do a lot of charity and like helpful work with the community, it may seem like, as Buddhists, we make perhaps less of an organized attempt to try to have that type of benefit. But I think that this quote here that's in this part about practice, it highlights the fact that it's difficult to be able to help other beings without having a certain amount of understanding yourself. So in a way, it's kind of similar to the first link of interdependence, the one with the blind person with the staff. And so I was looking to try to find a part of this book that has to do with refuge, because we have some students who are interested in that. And as it is, this book doesn't actually have a chapter on refuge itself, but it has some information on spiritual teachers. So I thought maybe that might be able to be beneficial. So maybe I can read a short part about spiritual teachers. In order to be able to practice the Buddha Dharma correctly, many favorable conditions are necessary. One first needs a priceless human experience. But even a priceless human experience alone is not enough. To optimize our practice of the path, we also need a wise and compassionate spiritual teacher to show the way. Lastly, we need to receive instructions from them. Each of these elements is necessary. Even with a priceless human existence, without a genuine spiritual teacher, attaining enlightenment is unlikely. If we have these first two requirements, but do not receive spiritual instructions from our teacher, our aspiration for liberation and Buddhahood will remain unfulfilled. These three are essential prerequisites to accomplishing the ultimate aim. I want to take some time to talk to you about spiritual teachers and guru devotion, topics that are dear to my heart, and I feel are essential for progress in realizing the nature of mind. The 37 practices of bodhisattvas emphasizes the importance of spiritual teachers. It states, relying on them, your faults vanish. Excellent qualities swell like the waxing moon. Cherishing the genuine spiritual teacher more than your own body is the practice of bodhisattvas. The term spiritual teacher has many connotations in the various traditions of Buddhism. There are the Hinayana, the Mahayana, and the Vajrayana traditions of Buddhism, and each defines the spiritual teacher differently. In the Hinayana, or Theravada, the spiritual teacher instructs us on the Buddhist teachings on discipline, what conduct to cultivate and what to reject. The teacher is a guide who shows us the way. In the Mahayana tradition, the spiritual teacher's role requires more of the student. It is important to see our spiritual teacher as a realized being who not only conveys the Buddhist teachings, but who embodies them. He is a personification of the Buddha Dharma. In the Vajrayana tradition, it places a high premium on the root guru, who is seen as indispensable to realization. The Sanskrit word for guru actually just means weighty or heavy, referring to someone whose mind stream is saturated with excellent qualities and heavy laden with immense kindness towards you. If you recall, These are the elements of reverence and gratitude that comprise devotion. In this tradition, the student is instructed to see the Guru as a Buddha, not in an imaginary or contrived way, but as a vivid experience. By the same token, it is only possible to see the Guru as Buddha after developing sincere confidence and devotion. Not every spiritual teacher of the Vajrayana is our Guru. It is possible to have many spiritual teachers, but only one root Guru. Because of this special relationship to the Guru, it is important to understand how to enter into it. One important step in finding a spiritual teacher is to recognize that teacher-student and guru-disciple relationship are different. It is fine for you to have a teacher who is simply your spiritual teacher, giving instructions on dharma and practice. A common misconception exists that there is some kind of formal procedure or ritual for becoming a particular student's teacher. There is none. Receiving teachings from a teacher makes you their student. Becoming the disciple of a guru is something else altogether. Please do not rush this process. This is an incredibly important determination. Do not be impatient. You are fortunate to live in a time with so many possibilities for learning the Buddha Dharma from other spiritual teachers before meeting your root guru. Do not make the mistake of thinking that you cannot receive teachings or be involved with a spiritual teacher before committing to a root guru. Ultimately, you will need to rely on a root guru to achieve the fruition because the guru reveals genuine reality to the disciple. But that is still a ways down the road. There is so much to learn first. You must first listen, contemplate, and meditate on the teachings concerning apparent reality. There is a great deal to learn and practice at this point, and many highly qualified teachers visiting Dharma centers around the world. Keep in mind that encountering your guru requires much merit over many lifetimes of creating favorable conditions. You do not just accidentally bump into a teacher. A true guru-disciple relationship is a strong and positive karmic connection that survives numerous lifetimes. Such a connection is different than the fascination students sometimes feel when they meet a spiritual teacher. This kind of allure is evanescent, diminishing, when you are not in the presence of that teacher. The next thing you know, another teacher rides into town and a sharper, fresher fascination arises. Then what? It ceases again when they leave. Fascination is driven by whim. It fluctuates, overwhelming us one instant and leaving us cold the next. The genuine connection between guru and disciple is not like that. It persists over many lives, maturing as it proceeds. It can certainly survive from one visit of the guru to the next. So do not worry if you have not yet encountered your root guru. It is a process, but it is also spontaneous. Meeting your root guru does not occur at any appointed time, yet it happens in an instant. You will travel the path, maturing in your understanding and experience. Then, suddenly, you will meet and recognize your root guru, seemingly in the blink of an eye. Even then, it is essential to be cautious, examining the circumstances with mindfulness and care before committing to this vital relationship. You should carefully analyze the teacher and the circumstances around him or her. Also, beware of yourself. We like to say, my root guru. It has a nice ring to it. This mundane wish can spur you on, committing to a disciple relationship before it is time. You must examine yourself. Take care not to be precipitous or to become enamored of an idea or an image. This is no light matter. You are entering into a samaya, which is a sacred covenant or bond with the guru. This must be a grounded and mindful decision, not a sudden whim. So make sure your wish to become a guru's disciple is sincere. In addition, even a genuine wish and motivation to become a guru's disciple must be stable. The recognition of the guru may occur suddenly, but making a formal commitment to them should be a process. Give yourself time to experience ups and downs and see if your motivation sticks. Once you are confident of your commitment, you can present yourself to the Guru and request their permission to be their disciple. The Guru will tell you whether it is appropriate at that time. The Guru, too, must determine whether or not to take the responsibility to lead a particular student. The effort comes from both sides. Guru and disciple must determine with care whether conditions are favorable. When all is in place, the connection will manifest naturally. So that's a little bit about the Guru-student relationship. And so maybe at this time we can take some questions, if there are any.
Here have questions? Yes? No? I think there's some online. Let's see. Yes. Okay, so Norjin Lamo said, very interested in sang offerings. Does one need empowerment to do this? Also very interested in water torma since I'm working on water issues in Florida.
Maybe the best thing to do, maybe I'll ask our resident Lama, Lama Tatop, to see if he might be able to give her like a lung or something in order to do it. But yeah, I don't know if there's anything like initiation for something like that. Yeah.
Okay. Timeless Treasures is available through Namse Bangzo bookstore.
Great.
And then someone said, is the Tibetan word for Buddhist something like Nangpa? I have not heard this before. Yeah, so.
It is Nangpa. Nanga Nangpa.
Nangpa.
Nangpa. Nang means in or internal. Ba turns it into like a person. So Nangpa could be like an internal person or someone who maybe is directed inwardly.
Thank you. And then, yeah, that looks like it for questions.
Oh, there's one here.
Oh.
Hi, Chime. Thank you. If you could look into finding what the Sky Treasury mantra is, that would be amazing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it was the...
Namse Bangzo bookstore?
Yes, that's right. Namse, N-A-M-S-E, Bangzo, B-A-N-G-D-Z-O.
I have this bag.
Oh, yeah.
This is their bag. Namse Bangzo. They've got a great collection of Dharma books. It's located on the top of Meads Mountain Road in Woodstock. They're the bookstore for KTD. Yep, KTD's bookstore. Yep, Namse Bangzo. Yeah.
So at the beginning of Living in Compassion, we talked about how the paramita, or how each of the six become paramitas by being, I think you said, pure of the three aspects.
Right.
I was wondering if you could go over those a little bit and
Sure.
what makes the difference between regular generosity and the perfection of generosity.
Sure. So maybe you've heard these called like the transcendental perfections or the transcendent perfections. That's because it transcends like subject and object. And so I think what they were explaining, I think this was in terms of generosity in particular, the idea of giver, the gift, and the giving.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're free of conceptualizing that you are giving something to someone and here's this thing, then it becomes not just the virtue of giving, but it transcends that. And with an understanding of that, that's when it becomes the perfect form of that virtuous action.
So when it said in the book that one is kind of like the cause and the other one is the fruition, do you remember that part? Or
Was it from the book, or was that?
yeah, from Living in Compassion.
Mhm.
It said one is like the causal aspect to bring about kind of the production of the perfection.
Mhm. I'm not sure I'm remembering that very well. I think I'm getting it confused with the 12 links of interdependence.
Huh.
I'm sorry about that.
No, I think it makes sense. So basically, not having such a concrete idea of the action makes it into a perfection. The difference between the two, between regular generosity and transcendent generosity.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Can you say one more time the two different types of offerings? It was the yeah.
Okay. So maybe the more common way of understanding the virtuous action of giving is like, I'm going to give you a flower.
I mean the like sung or smoky.
Oh.
Yeah, because I found it very helpful because
Sang and
when
sur.
I've done the
Yeah.
fire puja with Dan, for several years, and it's always like this, like we have a conversation about it not being smoky enough, or sometimes when we make fires, it's like make it really big, and then other times it's like make it really smoky. So, but we didn't, there's never been like a sit down talk of like why we do it, and this is it's been so long since I read this book, so it was really helpful.
Yeah. So what was in that chapter was just telling us a little bit about these two maybe greater categories of the sang and the sur. So sang is the burning of juniper usually, and it's very smoky, therefore, and it's usually done to purify the environment, and maybe it can be for the local environment deities that reside. Sur, on the other hand, is something that you can do for like formless beings, and also to pay back like karmic debts. And then it also has specific types of materials that you would burn. So like whether it's grains or clothes or things that those beings might want and can only receive if you intentionally give it to them and if they smell it. So that has more of the mind of the beings are, you're thinking about them and you're thinking about wanting to benefit those types of beings, and also beings in the bardo.
Thank you.
I have a question. Well, first let me check. Oh yeah. Everyone's saying it's really wonderful and Rinpoche would be really proud. And will you please teach again as you are able to, Chime Lama? And okay, thank you for your teaching. This is from Catherine Millie. How can we best work with our sadness at losing our guru? It is so precious to have you carry the torch of his teaching, and it brings me great joy. James.
Well, first off, I'm not sure we have anything to be sad about, because, our guru lived a very full and long life in which I think he was able to accomplish what he set out to do. And so therefore, I don't think we have any reason to feel bad or to feel sorry. I think we have a lot to be happy about and to rejoice. He was able to not only help complete his guru's monastery, he was able to complete this monastery as well, and also to do so much help in Tibet, and also to preserve so many teachings in both the physical book form, audio form, and in many ways. And so I think actually there's a lot of rejoicing that we should do. And also we should direct our energy towards praying for his swift rebirth, which, by the way, do we have those texts? The rebirth?
I think so. I can go look.
We might want those too.
Yeah,
But
that's
Yeah, so just focusing on, well, appreciating and rejoicing in the wonderful life that he lived, everything that he's given us, to make the most use of it, which means to practice it, to try to embody it, to carry it on, and to deepen our understanding of it, and then also to pray for his swift rebirth. I think that's where our attention should be put.
Perfect. I can go get those texts really quick.
That'd be great. We might read it for closing.
Okay, perfect. Do we have time to take a last question, do you think?
Any more questions?
Is there any more questions? No?
Okay.
I'll go run and look for those texts for our closing prayer.
Sure, thank you. So Nicole is going to go get the prayers for the swift rebirth for our guru, and also we'll be closing. I think it's 4 or past 4 now, so we'll be closing with the closing prayers. So that's the dedication and aspiration prayers on page 7. Great. Thank you. Okay. This will start in the second one. It will start on page 5. Just have that ready. We'll do the dedication and aspiration first. Oh.
Stack these up.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. So starting with Sonam. Sonam di tamche sikpani thobne nyepe ranam pamche ne kekana chi palak trupai sibe tsole droa droa sho gewali gewa gun sonam yeshe tso de sonam yeshe le jungwe dampa kunyi thopa sho jangchu semne rimboche make panam ke yurji ke panyam pa ne padam gong ne gong du pewa sho sem chen tam chen de dan den yurji ngen ru tam che tak tu dong pa sho yang chu sem pa kanda sa shu pa de da gung gi mon lam tru pa sho sang chen ri ge zu zin dam pe ka ge kun du sha du du ling bai sabke me join re bu sangak chu si shi chotar kya pe tra shi shu. Then on page 5 of the Blue Book, Dechen soki kolo doropa dusum gyawe dechen karma pa Yapse gyupa chepe sitsudi kalpa kalpe bardu shapten so kange sapsang sungge sangwala thasam rupe nyingpo jepai Bondang lokpe denam tamchene yargi chuo tabu gyuji Emma hondone migyo kunsan tukishi Jazol delwan yugme longchen por Dechen dolje rangzel jiyang pro Rangre tenge lama soade Bemma kara jebang ngadang Nangsi silnan karma palasok Druperik tsen jembo namgitu Drowe kompon yurdo jongyurji Misun kulpa shintu darwai Nyamtha nyingme drola tsergongne Seche gelwe tukche chikdupe Kyabne rinchen shingde nyur chalshok De la barche lokpar zombai Jungpo ichen tamche charchupe Tenson damchen dege korcheki Tunbe drogdang bawe bungeji Detar chuki koloi gilkorne Jume iki dunpa tse chikpe Dungwe bupa gyangne senge na Reltor malu Jesu tsimpal zur Namo Pema Karaye Kushi Dagni Tumba Chomdende Zapshi Trudra Temba Dambechu Rikdro Geden Tenzin Gedunde Lume Kyamne Dambe Gelekzul Dunpe Dunsor Zapsan Yingpulzu Dame Dorje Kunye Kolugyur Dumarochi Tengenge Partun Urgen Soke Gelwe Taktukyon Rolling Kyun Kun Kyape Sater Kun Julpe Ter Chen Ter Da Tsu Dang Kor Dume Chedra Guru Chen Le Pa Ter Chen Barwe Dorje Nyur Jon Sol Concho Tasum Gyatsoe Jin Lap Tang Daki Laksam Dakpe Dempe Top Chunyi Lua Mepe Nutui Jita Mumpa Deshin Rup Gyuji. Thank you all very much. Oh. Thank you all.